We're live. It's Andrew Ridgie, Hospitality and Politics, powered by the New York City Hospitality Alliance, and I am with Matt Jozwiak of Rethink Food. What's going on?
Not much, man. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So we're going to talk about a lot of things related to Rethink Food, but to put you on the spot, eat anything good recently?
Oh, man.
Or really good, I should say.
You know, I always like to shout out to Madison, my co-founder, Daniel, because recently had an incredible meal at Clemente Bar. But Rethink Food does family meal for the staff every day, like, for the meals we make for the community. And today it was incredible.
What was it?
Seasoned, beautiful rice, like the yellow rice with tons of herbs, roasted carrots with a little curry, and just a really nice salad with like citrus vinaigrette. Very nice. Beautiful. That's what was in my teeth earlier.
That sounds good. I will have to come by for a family meal. All right. So Rethink Food, which I want to talk all about the work that you're doing, but set us up. Tell us a little bit about what is Rethink Food.
Yeah, Rethink Food, we do a lot of stuff. I founded it in 2017. My background is as a cook. But we really focus on kind of, ultimately food insecurity, but through a very different lens. We fund restaurants in the communities we serve to make meals for local community centers. So the example I use all the time, because it's kind of a different idea, is Mana's Soul Food is a great restaurant in Harlem. We'll give them a grant for $50,000, $100,000. They'll make, 1,000 meals a week or 500 meals a week for Salem United Methodist Church. And they'll hand out the meals, outside.
Yeah. Well, that has like the great benefit of feeding people who need the food, but then also supporting a local restaurant, supporting the workers. It has an added benefit of the, food relief, but also economic development in a sense.
Yeah. I say about restaurants as like nonprofits. I mean,
well, a lot of people actually get into the restaurant business and they're like, I think I'm running a nonprofit. But
it is. It's actually like a really good nonprofit. Like if you think about like a nonprofit, right? Like, like there are nonprofits that do workforce development. They do language skills. There's people that do financial literacy. There's people that, provide jobs. Family meal at restaurants feeds more people than any nonprofit. Definitely more than my organization.
Yeah.
But Family Meal at the restaurants across New York City is New York City's biggest food insecurity nonprofit. Wow. And we don't really think about it. They're cornerstones of our community and, why I'm so passionate. And I think why we get along so well.
That's right. So let's talk a little bit about kind of the history of Rethink. So you were a cook. Tell me about your history as a cook. And we'll talk about you kind of transitioning into the food relief world.
Yeah. So as a cook, I started as a dishwasher in Kansas when my student loans got denied, and so I had to go get a second job because I was also the guy at the call center when your cable box breaks. That was my first gig. And I started washing dishes. I fell in love with the industry, and it kind of saved me. I didn't really have any other options, and moved up the ladder. Ended up in Chicago working in fine dining in 2008 when everything kind of happened. I moved to France.
Like the financial.
Yeah, financial crisis. I remember I got laid off. We did 0 covers at the restaurant I was at.
Wow.
It was like very weird. And then I got into this program in the south of France. I worked there for a year. I worked in Lyon for a year. And then I worked as an illegal immigrant, which gave me a lot of context for about 2-3 months. And then I went over to Noma in Copenhagen for a couple of months and moved back to Chicago to work at Alinea. I really, lots of love for Grant, but I really did not like it. It was the culture was kind of rough and all that stuff. And so my friend convinced me to move to New York City to help him with this kind of small nonprofit he was working on. And I got here and I just, I was a bar back at the Nomad Bar, rest in peace, one of the most incredible places ever. And I was working on this nonprofit with him, and I was, very scared, very broke, and then I, the nonprofit thing kind of didn't work out. So I just, asked my manager if I could go to 11 Madison Park and started as a cook there. 11 Madison Park for a year, and when I was at EMP, I had a friend, and I kept talking about how, I don't want to be too. I'm not trying to be hard on nonprofits. It's just coming from an industry where You have to be so driven. Every second counts. Everything is like, there's no margin, like everything matters. And then going to the nonprofit and meeting people in nonprofit where it's like, oh, let's do like a 6-month strategy session. And let's like, have a
Yeah, when something's happening in the kitchen, you got a full dining room, like it has to happen.
It has to happen, yeah.
Whereas other types of organizations, particularly in the nonprofit world, like you said, you can have a 6-month plan, study something about studying something to maybe do something in the future. Just the dynamic is completely different.
Yeah, it was really hard.
So let me just go back. So Noma, Alinea, and 11 Madison Park. I mean, you're talking about fine dining. These are the top kitchens really around the globe. What do you take away from them? I'm sure you learned so much. There's things you love. There's things you're frustrated with. But coming out of that and working at those 3 different restaurants, is there like 1 or 2 things you learned or that happened that have really helped shape you in a beneficial way?
Yeah, all of it, man. I mean, there were some rough times. It was all of it. Like, I think that the number one thing for me was the appreciation of time. And like, how much can you actually get done in 15 minutes? How much can you get done in a minute? Like, time, is our most valuable resource, and using it in a way where like I stack my calendar and I'm like, I wake up in the morning and I'm like, I'm going to get this done today. This is going to happen. And I think
you really do that. You have a calendar and you're like, here are the things that need to.
Yeah. And I have my routine, I walk my dog in the morning and I think about that thing and how I'm going to get it done. And I go to all my meetings and then I declare victory on the day when that thing is done, and I don't stop. But that intentionality to like just really clear execution is really what drives me. And I try to give it to the team. And I think my team reflects a lot of that. The other thing I just think is, it's discipline around craftsmanship. I think there's this like food is art, and, this idea that chefs are, sitting there like making beautiful paint. No, you're a craftsman. You're making like, this is about skill that you learn from repetition. It's not about like some creative, beautiful thing. Skill that you learn through hardcore, intense repetition.
So not art, it's a craft.
It's a craft. It's definitely craft.
Yeah, because I think so many people look at a beautiful plate or see like the image of chef with the tweezers, and it looks like something art, throwing paint on a canvas and, doing all of this, but it really is the repetitive nature and the craftsmanship of it all. So, all right. So Noma, Alinea, 11 Madison Park, as a result of not getting your money to go to college and try to figure things out and taking these chances. But then you end up in the food relief world. So you're 2017 or so when you launched?
2017 we launched Rethink, yeah.
Okay. And what was the origin of that?
So I got in kind of this nonprofit space and I had a discussion with somebody and they were like, just do the thing that needs to be done. And at that point, City Harvest is a great job picking up this like massive, large scale stuff, but nobody was focusing on what do we do with like all the sauces? What do we do with all this like, prepped food? What do we do with all this stuff that comes out of like the restaurant industry? And I was like, that clearly is the thing that needs to be done. So I left, I private chefed for some, really, really incredible individuals. One of them is now the chair of my board. To raise money, I took half my paycheck every week and put half into the Rethink bank account and half for me. Rented a truck, called my friends. James Kent and Daniel Hume were actually the first people that allowed me to pick up food. And rest in peace, James. But I always thank him for that, because everybody was like, what are you talking about? You're going to come 1 a.m. and take my garbage? What,
It's incredible. I think of the photo that we have, the 3 of us at 11 Madison Park for the Rethink event. And it shows you how people can have such a positive impact on an industry and on a community and on a city.
Yeah.
All right. So you're in food relief, you're doing Rethink, and your idea is to basically go pick up what would be kind of leftovers or items that weren't used from restaurants after service or whatnot. And then you help prepare it and you deliver it to those in need?
Yeah, we deliver it to community centers.
Okay.
So a bunch of different community centers that were making the food themselves. And, then we take it back to our kitchen and put it together. And during that time, like 2019, we were kicking around this idea, like, why don't we just pay somebody in the restaurant to do it there and we'll pick it up prepared and then we'll hand it out. We don't have to do this, don't have to spend so much time with this second step. So the seeds were kind of growing for the COVID pivot.
Yeah. Okay. So then obviously the pandemic hit. And I mean, I don't know. It seems like I know, obviously, with the hospitality lines, we were front and center in so many policy issues and the crisis of the pandemic. But in so many ways, you were also there in this huge space that was within food relief. People were in lockdown. People then were scared to go out. They needed to get food. People had lost their jobs. So I feel like the work that you were doing with Rethink was just like more important than ever.
Yeah.
Because, or I don't want to say more important than ever, but it was so important. It was so much more expansive than ever.
Yeah.
Talk about that experience. Can you talk about, like, do you know the number of meals that you did? Like, how did you organize that? Because there was so much crisis happening all over to try to slow it down and figure out where Rethink falls within what I would say were essential services to the city at that point.
Yeah, it was brutal, man. And I think people forget the first like 6 weeks before the unemployment benefits hit.
Mm-hmm.
And, there was no press out, right? So like the stories of people getting robbed in supermarket parking lots, like that kind of stuff that really did happen, wasn't shared as widely as how horrible and chaotic it was. We were out there on the streets, but, I got a call from my board chair and he said, I was like, oh, this COVID thing is going to go away soon. He goes, you're going to be Italy in 2 weeks. So either shut down or make a plan. And I was like, fuck, let's go. And so I spent all night with somebody who was actually in Europe talking about what wasn't going well in Italy. And they centralized everything. And that was the problem. They had these big kitchens that were pumping out food. So I called some friends and I was like, we had $380,000 in the bank account. And I was like, all right, I can get almost 10 restaurants signed up for $40K. And by the time I write that last check, I got to go raise money. And so the idea was, give 10 restaurants $40,000 to do whatever they can to make with the rest of their produce, like whatever they have left, to make meals for community centers. Not really a price per unit. None of that was really organized. Where it went was just dependent on who would pick up my phone call. Like there was no application. Yeah. And then, it really worked, especially in Chinatown. Like it really, really, really worked and people were excited about it. And so I called Daniel Hume and I remember this.
Who's the executive chef and owner of 11 Madison Park.
Yeah, the owner of 11 Madison Park. And I was like, chef, I got this idea, it's really crazy, but can we turn 11 Madison Park into one of our, restaurants that's producing meals? And he's like, fuck yeah. Wow. Immediately was no questions asked. He's like, let's go. And that night, allegedly, he calls his American Express contact and goes, I need you to fund this. And so then the next day we found out Amex was going to fund it. We set the whole thing up, $250,000. And we turned 11 Madison Park into kind of our star meal making partner.
Wow.
And we raised $37 million in 90 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So what is among the top restaurants in the entire world, 11 Madison Park, essentially overnight shuts down, becomes a food relief production center. Not sure exactly where you're going to get the funding to prepare all of this.
Yep.
One phone call goes in, money comes out, and then all of a sudden you get all this attention and it allows you to raise how much?
$37 million. Yeah.
And where did that money go to? What was that used for?
We distributed all of it to restaurants. We had 115 restaurants at our height in actually 5 major cities. We're still in 3. And around in the middle of summer, when we were well capitalized, which the guy running the program at the time, we had this game, which was basically how many restaurants can you sign up and how fast can I raise money in that 90 days? Yeah. So I was raising money. And even sometimes before we got the check, we had spent the money.
So how did restaurants find you, or did you reach out to them? Because there's a lot to go. I mean, we'll probably talk a little bit about it, but I know when it comes to food relief, obviously it's portion size, the distribution, making sure it's fresh, making sure it gets where it's supposed to, making sure that it's, culturally, appropriate, and stuff like that. It's complicated. I guess what I'm saying, it's a lot more complicated than just having money and being we're going to buy food and give it to people.
Yeah. And we also we are the cheapest person who does this. We pay them $4 to $5 a meal. So being consistent about it is important. But we pivoted. There was the disaster relief kind of section, but about 6 weeks in, unemployment benefits started picking up. The immediate crisis started to kind of ease and swell. And that's when Deloitte reached out.
Okay.
And they donated like Deloitte and McKinsey actually at the same time. We're doing 2 separate consulting projects for us. And a lot of it was restaurant selection, community selection, price per unit, cultural sensitivity. And we developed kind of a rubric for how do we select restaurants. But what we realized kind of by June, we really realized that we were doing it wrong. We should be going to the community center and to the city council members and saying, what are the community centers that have the best reputation that need food? And then asking the community center, what are the restaurants in your neighborhood that partner with you? Because, this thing that restaurants do so much, especially in like smaller, like in Ridgewood, like Tasty's Diner and everything they do for Father Mike's, nonprofit, there's this huge symbiotic relationship between restaurants and community centers. And so when we found them, then we went to that restaurant. We'd fund that restaurant.
Yeah. I got to say, it's something we always talk about, and I want to continue and push myself to make sure that I'm always telling that story. It is incredible the amount of philanthropic work the restaurant industry in New York City, but really everywhere does. It's like every single local church, community center, softball team, PTA fundraiser, restaurants are the first one to step up, donating food, giving gift certificates for raffles and everything. And I think it's really incredible the way that you and Rethink have been able to kind of harvest that generosity, harvest and harness it, I should say, and really, turn it into action. So what is the restaurant reaction to? Because obviously, like we said at the beginning, there's the philanthropic part, where you're getting food to people who need it, where cooks, restaurant industry, we feed people. But then there is that economic development part, particularly for small businesses. We don't have to focus too much on the pandemic, but obviously that was a crisis. Places were closed down. So that revenue, the $4 or $5, whatever dollars per meal you were paying them to prepare these meals, was critical. But outside of a crisis like the pandemic, just in general, yes, there's the very busy restaurants, but there are the thousands and thousands of others that are really struggling. And I would presume it could be helpful for many of them to have partners like Rethink Food so they can do good by preparing meals and serving them to folks who need them. But it also allows them to bring money into the business. It allows them to keep people employed, maybe even employ more people. Can you talk a little bit about that kind of economic development dynamic you have with them?
Yeah, for sure. And it's like, I think it's one of the best parts of the program, to be honest. Like, if a restaurant gets a grant for $50,000 a year, and we always say this, like, you're not going to make money on the meal, but you're going to make more money on the salad that you sell. You know what I mean? So like, if you can have, an extra consistent $50,000 worth of revenue, your staff's more consistent, and we, it's climate week. So, on the sustainability front, like we have people that donate like all different other kinds of things because they have them. You're roping in things that, oh, well, I have this stuff in my fridge, so I'm going to throw that in the meals today. It really helps the restaurant kind of balance their books, We did make a mistake, to be honest. We overfunded a restaurant, and when we had to scale down, it was really hard for them. Okay. So for us, consistency is.
What do you mean by overfund?
We had a community center that needed a lot of meals, and we couldn't find we could only find one restaurant that was like in walking distance, and we funded them pretty extravagantly and like $250,000 a year. Yeah. And then when we had to go down to 50, they couldn't really handle the downturn.
Got it. So there's like a balance of figuring out how much support is good for the business without making the business overly reliant on that funding.
Or overly focused on it.
Yeah.
And like not focused on their primary business, But it makes a huge impact because, the margin, what I think is insane is that, the city spends, depending on who you ask, because they actually don't know, our rough calculations over $500 million on food.
New York City spends over $500 million annually on food, feeding people.
Yep. Between DFTA, homeless services, Department for the Aging, homeless services, and if you include federal programs like the waiver 1115, like Medicaid meals, school food, after school programs, it's an insane amount. And that's not including like the military is the largest purchaser of food. But, that's like $500 million. And like, if we could put that money into the restaurant industry, like, it just makes no sense.
Where's the food now coming from? Like, how's it prepared?
It's a really competitive industry that I didn't even know about. And there's about 3 major players that do a lot of their work outside of the 5 boroughs and like kind of big manufacturing kind of assembly line, the hairnet and the mask kind of, places that, and a lot of it's, it's not, probably 10% of it's thrown away at a minimum.
So it's like big corporatized food relief, which obviously works to varying degrees, but there's also, it sounds like, this huge opportunity to have, more localized, smaller businesses benefit, have things a little bit more community centered, and achieve the same, if not better outcomes.
Yeah.
So how do we do that? What's the deal? So
well, Zoran,
sounds good.
No, and I know Mayor Adams was actually very supportive in this. Yeah. We've started to scale up a program where we're able to do this. Commissioner Molly Park has been very supportive. Okay. Kate McKenzie, I got to give her a huge shout out because she has been like the biggest advocate for this. Is actually in her 10-year food policy plan.
Okay.
I think it's just going to take time to kind of slowly but surely move these contracts over to small business. And I think it has to go through Rethink right now because of the city's payment plan. Okay. So we pay restaurants earlier and then the city pays us later. So
that's important because one of the things that you always hear, and this is a little outside of quite outside my world, but I'm familiar with just in the nonprofit space, is that one of the huge problems for nonprofits is they do all of this work and it can take sometimes years for them to get paid on a contract. And I feel like particularly for restaurants where it's not just staffing, but it's also like buying that product, they don't have the cash flow to play with and a lot of them are struggling. So they do need, money either up front or as soon as possible to be able to
for sure
fulfill
the
meal production.
People talk, nonprofits aren't getting paid on time. And the city opened up a 0 interest loan fund for $100 million. This is how crazy it is. The city opened a loan fund for 0 interest dollars that they are administering because they can't pay them fast enough. And and it's, sometimes years, but mainly around like 6-7 months. But like, it's not just the food, it's the locksmith company, it's the laundry company. And so a lot of what the social service agencies are kind of forced into buying because they're not getting paid in time is really is big, huge national company products when the local locksmith company and the local dry cleaner could be doing this business.
Interesting.
But they can't. And so you're talking about, what's HSS, $2.1 billion budget. And you assuming, let's say, at least 20% of that's procured services. Yeah. It's like $400 million of the city's revenue just not going to New York City because we can't pay them fast. Like that's the true crisis of the problem.
So there seems like there's also just so much, there would be incentive on behalf of government to incentivize restaurants to be able to step in and fulfill these needs. What do you think, based on your relationship working with restaurants, need to, continue supporting food relief efforts, but also encouraging other restaurants that are just so busy running their day-to-day operations to basically sit and think like, okay, I could, not only do good by helping feed people, but also help my business, help my employees by getting more engaged in food relief work? Are there public policies that should be enacted?
I don't know if it's like a policy thing, but I think that restaurants could, like when I worked at 11 Madison Park, I didn't know that I think it's on 28th and Park, there's a shelter that actually my wife and I live over there. So we donate like clothes and stuff there. And they have a food program. And I had no idea that was there. And so I encourage restaurateurs to talk to their city council members about what community centers are in their area and then partner with them. They might even buy the meals from you. Like there are some nonprofits that will buy the meals for $2 to $6 a piece and just partner with them, like do their gala, do their fundraising event, do their staff event, like really reach out to them to try to develop a true partnership between the two.
Where did the name Rethink Food come from?
Well, it's kind of a funny story. My lawyer's gonna love this. So
we don't want to get you in trouble.
No, because I don't know if this was first time I heard this was in New York, but SFN, is that a common thing in a restaurant, or is that just a lot of Madison Park?
Maybe.
Something for nothing.
I think I've heard of it, but I don't know if it's.
That's what you say, like SFN caviar to table 22, and it means something for nothing.
Yeah.
And so originally Rethink was called Something for Nothing, and our mission statement was to rethink food, meaning like repurpose, reuse, do something with it. And I filed our paperwork completely wrong because I was a line cook, and I was like, I can do this, and I'm trying to like file for a nonprofit by myself, and completely screwed it up. And my lawyer was like, look, like it's going to take, we were about to launch, and she's like, we could take 6 months to dissolve this and like restructure this, or you could just change the name. And I was like, well, I can't think of another name. She's just like, just call it Rethink Food. That's how it came.
Look at that.
Yeah, that was it.
Very nice. I love stories like that.
Yeah.
So what have you learned? So going from a cook to running a nonprofit, I feel like there's so many different nonprofits and people want to get into that world or form their own nonprofit or for-profit companies. They find that they really are passionate about food relief or workforce development or, autism research or one in a million things. And they want to form a nonprofit. What have you learned? Are there like a couple, like one or two things that you've just learned throughout the process of launching and running Rethink Food that you're like, I wish I knew that from the beginning?
Almost everything. Well, yeah, it really was. Like, I was a line cook. I never had a company email address.
Okay.
I'm really bad at spelling because I never wrote emails and I never wrote letters or anything. Like I made a lot of like really stupid decisions. I overhired. That was a disaster. Like, I really screwed up. I wish there was a ton that I knew back then, and I'm like really grateful. And I'm shocked that my board still puts up with me for some of the nonsense that I do. But I learned a lot. To the people that are talking about, don't start a nonprofit. There's so many nonprofits, and everybody was doing it during COVID. 80% of them got dissolved, maybe 90, how Share My Meals off their plate, all these, all these they did great immediate work. Just find an organization that you believe in and that you like. And and if you want to reach out to me, I know the landscape pretty well. And if I'll help you find your right place, get on the board, commit, show up to the board meetings, be supportive, donate meals, donate stuff, tell your friends, be positive about it. And but we keep trying to add layer. Like, I started Rethink because nobody would pick up the food from 11 Madison Park.
Yeah.
If there was somebody else that was willing to pick it up, I would have just done that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, no, listen, we formed the New York City Hospitality Alliance Impact Foundation, which is our charitable organization. And not that we wouldn't in the future get more into the day-to-day operations of like workforce development, education, food relief. But what I quickly realized was there are really incredible organizations like Rethink, Emma's Torch,
love Emma's
Hot
Torch.
Bread Kitchen.
Kitchen,
there's a lot of different organizations. I feel bad even calling out a couple because there's so many others I don't want to miss. But those are really, really, great ones. The Ann Saxelby Foundation, we just gave them a grant. So we could be affected by raising money and then identifying these different food relief, workforce development organizations and awarding them a grant. And then getting involved, not just financially, but I think also just the connections. Yeah. I think also the brain trust.
The lobbying power.
Yeah, for things. So that's been really the direction with our Hospitality Alliance Impact Foundation. We've done stuff with you, with Queens Together, another phenomenal organization, to really help kind of uplift the work and support the work that they're doing, both financially, but also from just a brain trust and feedback and kind of connection. So I think that's a good thing. Are there specific restaurants? I mean, I know you work with a lot of them, but are there, one or two restaurants that come into mind other than, Daniel and 11 Madison Park that have been really involved with you and Rethink in a way that stands out?
For sure. Your board members, actually. Bistro.
Yeah.
Jasmine, Junior, and Alfredo. Like, those three are just some of the most incredible individuals that I've had the chance to work with. Marlow's Bistro. Are they?
They are. Yeah, they're not too far from where I live, and they just opened up on the Upper East Side as well.
Yeah, they're really incredible. I love Elena is incredible. Benny's Cafe in Ridgewood, which is run by Father Mike Lopez, is incredible. I got to make sure I hit
what makes them incredible. So you mentioned like Beatstro. I mean, I know they do so much in their neighborhood, Mott Haven, in the South Bronx. But when you say like incredible, what does that mean, and how do they work with you? Because I feel like sometimes, a restaurant's like, okay, I want to do this, I want to support that, but maybe they don't always know exactly what action they need to take, and they're so busy. So if they don't act on it right away or have like a clear path to participation, they may not do it.
That's hard. Yeah, it's hard to do it. And like the best way for Rethink, like if you want to donate family meal or something like once a week, it just has to be consistent with us. We also will ask you to hit our dietary guidelines. And what makes restaurants incredible, like one I really gotta like shout out, because this is the funniest story. Ali from Brain Food and 8-Bit, those like little burger shops.
Yeah.
So we have like really strict dietary guidelines about like what we serve, because we want people to eat healthy food. Yeah. But he was like, fuck that. Like, so he opened his own distribution that's just like burgers, fries, shakes, like fucking like good, tasty food that like people really, really want to eat. And he donates like 500 meals like every single week, Wednesday night, set up this whole distribution with some of his friends. And I just like, it's really inspiring. It's really inspiring to a lot of other people too. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about like that? That's just great. Like, what do people want? I've always heard about, the cultural sensitivity part is like, obviously there's dietary restrictions, there's, kind of religious observance, but there's also just like cultural, like depending on where you're from, what you're used to eating and what you want. Yeah. And I feel like because food relief is such kind of a human, it's a very human, work. It's feeding people. You need to kind of meet them where they are and respect them. And even if you're, giving them food, you want it to be something that they're going to want and they're going to appreciate, and they're going to feel like they're being, respected. Yeah,
it's like I feel like Rethink's model is a cheat code, and I also give me an opportunity to kind of talk about the tax credit a little bit that we're really advocating for, but like. It's actually not that hard because, the community centers are surrounded by restaurants. So like the people are in the community, they're like, Chinese people want Chinese food cooked by Chinese restaurants. Like it's not that challenging. But also like sometimes they want lasagna. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it's about listening, which we have a feedback mechanism that we're always we're always looking at. But for the most part, like just talk to the restaurants in the community. Yeah. And we've had so many situations where I've gone out and I've seen the food and I was like, they hated the food that we were delivering, and I looked at it and I was like, this is beautiful with this. They're like, no, we want this, and I look at what they wanted and I'm like, oh. But they're like, they love it, and so you just got to listen and do it. But we have the food is there and available, and so if Rethink's trying to get a tax credit, this is where if we got this done, every restaurant in New York State, not everyone, but a lot of them could participate.
Okay.
And instead of you donate meals, you'll, in tax deduction, maybe you'll get like $500 at the end of the year. But we're trying to build a tax credit that Liz Kruger and Senator Hinchy just decided to co-sponsor in the Senate, and Charles Fall is sponsoring in the Assembly, so that when restaurants donate their meals, they get a tax credit that's almost as good as cash.
Okay.
And that means that, if you're a mom and pop restaurant in Phoenicia and you make $10,000 worth of meals for your local community center, you can get, a tax credit. Okay.
All right. So Senator Kruger, Senator Hinchy, and then Assemblymember Fall are proposing a tax credit that restaurants would get to help them prepare meals to then be served to New Yorkers in need.
Yep.
Excellent. And how does this get passed? What needs to be done to get it passed? Because it sounds like it's an excellent way to get food to folks who need it, support local restaurants, support jobs. There's not policies that are always like win-win-wins, but this sounds like a win-win-win.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I had a 5-second discussion with Governor Hochul about it, but like, that's kind of our last thing. It's kind of in, Hochul's court. She has been such a supporter of restaurants, and she's been so focused on it that I don't think it's a matter of her deciding. I think it's a matter of us just getting the right amount of time in front of her. But I'm confident it's happening. So just, when you're electeds, see your electeds, ask them about it, seeing if they can help, emailing them, and emailing the governor's office to show your support would be huge. And then we're trying to pass it on the federal level too, which is a lot harder, but we've made substantial progress. It's going to be carried by Congressman LaHood, who's on the Ways and Means Committee. He's in Illinois. But that tax credit's $50,000.
Okay.
Because your federal tax exposure is so much higher.
Sure.
And I don't want to say it's like, what I'll say it. It's kind of like a silver bullet. And there's a friend of mine's trying to do one just for produce.
Okay.
It's a silver bullet. If you had every restaurant in America, contributing some level of free meals to their church, their mosque, to whatever, like it could be, you could just end it. It could just be over. There could just be a free meal option somewhere in your neighborhood. Mm-hmm. You might not get to choose. You might not, it might not be an 8-bit burger, but like literally the whole food insecurity thing could just be done, Yeah.
How often, if at all, do you get to speak with the recipients of the meals that you help fund and deliver?
Almost never.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you ever get any feedback from them, or like what is your kind of connection to, I guess it's mostly with the community centers?
Yeah. So we work with the community leaders that have built trust with the people that are coming. Mm-hmm. I'm an outsider. Yeah. So me rolling up and being like, how are you doing? It's just not, it's not what we do. We've talked about this a lot. Mm-hmm. Like we don't survey. We don't have them fill out like, are you poor? Like we don't do any of that stuff. Like we don't do any of that. So the community leader has to fill out on their app. It's like a Yelp, like, how is the food? And they'll tell us what.
It's funny. You know what? I asked that question. I was like, oh shit. Like, cause you're like, don't. But then when you explain why you don't have kind of as much direct communication with the, recipients of the food, it actually makes sense. And it's actually pretty fascinating. And I think important to show that, you kind of have staked out what your role in this process is, and how to be the most effective in realizing finding the local community centers and really nourishing those partnerships and those relationships is where I guess more of your time is spent,
for sure,
versus than being with the people that are receiving it.
And we don't label anything too. Mm-hmm. Like there's no rethink sticker on every meal you eat, and big sign that says, blah, blah. And we've talked about it more and more, but like the restaurants, you'll love this. The restaurants label, some of them label their food when they distribute it.
Okay.
And there are people in New York City, that kids, they make $100,000 a year that come to some of the community centers we serve, like 6-figure people who work at banks, because of how unaffordable New York City is. We really are in a crisis. This truly is a crisis. And, what we find though, is that people see the restaurant name and then they, they're not broke. They just need a little help. What I mean? Just need a free lunch every once in a while. We all do. And they actually end up, going to the restaurant and the restaurant gets busier. Yeah. And so it's this great marketing tool that brings people, and then the restaurant's busier, so they have more resources to donate. And it's really beautiful connection.
That is beautiful. I think that's one of the things that people don't always realize, the faces of all the different people that, sometimes just need a little support. And food is among, food and shelter, but really food, because without food, you just can't exist.
Largest single population of food insecure people are college kids.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's the biggest concentrated group. UCLA is 35% food insecure. LaGuardia Community College, or like CUNY schools, around 40, 50, 60%, in some measurements. Yeah. And then I don't know, I didn't go to college, but like I've heard that, sometimes there's free pizza and then people use it for beer money. Like that's more or less like, maybe not for beer money, but that's more or less what we do,
Yeah, no, I went to LaGuardia Community College.
You did?
For a little while. I did. I didn't graduate, but I went for a little while. My wife works at CUNY. And it's just amazing all these kind of like community institutions and how if they all are kind of, working together, the good impact and the good work that you can do. All right. Let's talk about just kind of rethink in the future. So obviously you launched, before the pandemic, you were figuring out what the organization is. It's like you go from, cook to CEO of a nonprofit, and, you're building this plane as it's taking off. I think that's the expression. Kind of like what we did with the Hospitality Alliance. So it's almost like kind of, smoke and mirrors, like, oh, we're this, big organization to everybody, but then in the background, you're still building it out, putting systems into place. Then the pandemic hits, and obviously New York City and the world is just upended in crisis, and the work you do gets pushed to the forefront. You raise this amount of money, you create all these community partners, restaurant partners. Thankfully, we're now, out of the pandemic. There's still lots of other types of crises that we're dealing with. But what's next for Rethink? Like, what do you want to do as an organization? You mentioned the tax credit, but there are other kind of pillars of work that are really important to you as the organization grows into its next stage of growth, hopefully?
Yeah, I think communications for us has been like a really big challenge. Like we do, it's kind of funny. We spend all this time trying to look like a big organization and like a serious organization and all this stuff. But I've actively dismantled all that. We are now deceptively small.
Okay.
We're much bigger than we look. Our last year we did almost 75 million in revenue. We made 13 million meals. Like we do a ton of work. We're in
2014? 2024.
Yeah. We're in, 3 cities. We're very active in Washington. We're very active at the state level. But we're trying to just kind of actually like not lose ourselves.
Okay.
And keep our kind of line cookiness, if that's a thing, in our restaurant and our hospitality. So that's kind of the internal work. And then external, we're doing all these video series with restaurants.
Okay.
We just did Zob Zob.
No, nice.
Yeah. And it's on our Instagram, Rethink Food.
And Brian.
Yeah, they're so great.
Yeah.
Pay is the best.
Yeah.
It's the best. And Brian's all right. No, I'm just kidding. Brian's great. No. He always tells me he's going to outcook Daniel Hume. But showing the faces in this work so we can build examples that people can follow, which we've never really been good at communication. So that's our kind of push.
Yeah, no, I was always proud. I remember when we launched the Hospitality Alliance, there was a bunch of press, and there was like one article that, called like the scrappy organization, and I was like, yeah, that's right. We're just out there, it's like a street fight, you're out there and you're figuring things out and you're working hard. And I think it's important to, balance that, kind of system oriented professional organization with that scrappiness and that line cookness that just allows you to push forward, do things a little bit outside of the box, and stay real. Because at the end of the day, you're still in food, you're in hospitality, you're in restaurants, you're in community service. And so much of that is just connecting with people.
Yep.
And sometimes if you do become kind of too big or, too corporate, it can change that, dynamic a little bit. So it's important to kind of keep connected.
Yeah. How do you guys keep it? Because your vibe has been so solid. It's so cool. So well respected.
I always joke around. I'd be like, the Alliance isn't a job or a career; it's a lifestyle.
Yeah. That, dude. Yeah.
Which I feel like is similar. You're working. It's similar if you're in the restaurant business, where it's like nights, weekends, holidays. You're working in these high stress, fast-paced environments with people. So it's like why we call it family meal. We don't still call it lunch break or dinner break. It's because it's like a family. You're dealing with the best of people. You're dealing with people in challenging times. And I think always recognizing that kind of keeps us part of the realness and the essence and that scrappiness where, I'm sure we could have made other decisions that maybe would have been, more, I don't want to say corporate because that's not the word I'm looking for, but just more polished in a way where you kind of lose the edge. So we try to manage it.
Yeah, I feel that way at your events because you throw the best events.
They're fun.
They're so fun. And you throw the best events and it's like there's a level of like, this is what we're here to do. But also you all work very hard. So we're throwing a party.
Yeah. And that's what it is because people want to have fun. They want to connect. They want to chat with each other. They don't always get to spend time. So it's basically kind of creating that community. And I feel like creating community, not that we see or we want to project on people, but kind of creating the conditions to allow the people in attendance and that engage with us to really create and nourish that community. So it's what they see and it's what's reflective in their self, you know, because at the end of the day, we're an association that represents the restaurant nightlife industry. So they need to see us in them and vice versa.
Well, so many great relationships that I have happened at your events.
I love to hear
including like God's Love We Deliver. We were talking, but then I saw him at the last event and we ended up talking like a lot more. And then now we're actually going to be doing some real work together and all this kind of stuff. Like I've made dozens of friends and like I love those events.
I love to hear. Well, that's honest. That's really what it's about. I'm actually on one of the advisory boards for God's Love We Deliver. Like they do so much, you know, incredible work. I mentioned Queens Together, and even like you mentioned, you know, like City Harvest engaged in the restaurant industry and City Meals on Wheels, and there's just so many different organizations like in this space. And what's so beautiful about it is all of them engage with the restaurant industry. So whether it's food relief, whether it's workforce development, or cancer research, or you name it, they're engaging with the industry, and the industry comes out to support. And I think what's cool too about Rethink and what you've done is like, you know, you're a cook.
Yeah.
And tell just something, cook versus chef.
Yeah.
What's the deal? Because you keep referencing yourself as a cook, but I mean, I feel like you're like a...
No, I will always be a cook.
Yeah.
I will always wear a blue apron.
Okay.
You know, in France, that's what that symbolizes. Yeah. It's like, even people who do construction and stuff, like they'll like any dirty, messy, kind of grimy job, they'll wear a blue apron.
Okay.
You know, Thomas Keller made it a little different, but no, we've talked about it a lot. I just think it's the people who do the work are the cooks, and the chef is more like this, you know, fancy position, and like there are that's needed and necessary and great, but like I you know, I was a sous chef at a restaurant, but I never was an executive chef. I was always a line cook and a bar back, which was an awesome job.
So, and I know you're not working in the restaurant anymore, but what when you walk into a restaurant and you're just going out for dinner or lunch or whatever it is, are there certain things that you look for to be like, oh, you know, what's going on?
Not as much. I used to be incredibly annoying, but also as like a line cook, you don't go out.
Yeah.
So when you're there, you're like, oh my God, like this is what's out there. You know, you're so like, you're just like stressed out. But I used to, you know, but number one thing, like I was like clean bathrooms. Clean bathrooms mean clean kitchen. No, but I'm not one of those people who's like misspellings on the menu or anything like that, you know. And then hospitality in general, just like the kindness of the server, and you know, that goes a long way for me.
Do you give advice, like cook advice, or you like what are things that you look back when you were, you know, on the line or whatever that you think about and you're like, I learned this, or I should have done this differently, or I was doing this and it worked really well?
I think one, be careful who you take advice from. So well, that's a caveat of my advice. But you know, I think that people now that I see this more and more and more, even in you know, Rethink, there's been examples of this where they're just so hungry to get to the next level. Like spend a year on garde-manger.
Yeah.
Spend a year really learning how to do it in the whys and 4 seasons. You don't need to go to hot apps. When you're on hot apps, spend a year on hot apps. You don't need to go to fish line. Like just really take the time to be good at what you do. And I was so anxious to like, you know, I was like, oh my God, if I'm not a sous chef by 28, like or 25, I'm like a loser. And now I look back and I'm like, that was ridiculous. Like I should have just really taken more time to appreciate the process of learning and growing and not tried to rush it. So to young people, whether you're in a corporate environment or a line cook environment, like just like hang out in a job for a couple of years and don't rush it. There's so much to learn, and you learn the most after the first year. I really believe that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Listen, love what you and Rethink are doing. Thank you for all the important work you do. Love that you're a friend and we're in the same circle and have so many other great friends, you know, in the industry. The tax credit idea is great. I can't wait to hear and see more of that. And just figuring out other ways. Both the Hospitality Alliance and our Impact Foundation can work with Rethink Food is great. Any last? No, I just wanted to thank you for what you do, because, you know, we do work in other cities and other states, there's the restaurant associations, but there's not anybody who's so in tune and aligned with the restaurants the way that you are and fighting for them the way you are. Like,
New York City restaurant industry would be very different if you didn't create this amazing organization. So thank you.
Thank you. This is Andrew Ridgie of the Mutual Admiration Club show.
I love you, bro.
How do we? Last thing, if you want to find out more about Rethink Food, they want to support Rethink Food.
Yeah.
What do they do?
Follow us on Instagram. It's the best way. Rethink Food. It's the handle.
That's so easy. Okay. Hospitality and Politics is the real name of the show. I'm Andrew Ridgie, and it's powered by the New York City Hospitality Alliance. Matt, Rethink Food. Thank you.
Thanks, man.